Today I'm going to talk about the Pardo family, the first 5 generations that covers roughly 2 centuries. First of all, there's more than one Pardo family, and I haven't looked for possible connections to other Pardo families in exotic places, but also in Amsterdam. For example, in Amsterdam alone, you have the Pardo family, the Diaz Pardo family, and the Arminio Pardo family, and I can't connect them. So I ignore them for this talk. It all starts with Joseph Pardo, who was born in Salonika. He went to Venice before 1589. He was a hacham of the Levantine synagogue in Venice. And from Venice he went to Amsterdam. He became a Chacham of Bet Jacob in 1608, roughly. In 1618 he switched to the Bet Israel synagogue on a late point in his career because he died 1 year later. And historians are still wondering why he did switch. So I'll not bother you with that one. This is the interior of the Levantine synagogue in Venice. I read that it has not changed much in its structure, but it will have changed in colors and paintings and the rest. But it still has the same layout as the early one. So maybe Joseph Pardo officiated here. He went to Amsterdam, and a little bit about that first communities. First of all, these were all newcomers at this point of time. So Joseph Pardo had a lot of newcomers from Portugal and Israel who maybe did not know much about Judaism, and he was instrumental in teaching the first generations of Portuguese Jews arriving in the rituals and theology of Judaism. The first synagogue is mentioned in 1608, but might have started earlier. But the community really took off in the years 1614, 1616. In just these 3 years, they purchased a cemetery, Bet Chaim. They established the school, Talmud Torah at Chaim. They established Bikur Holem, the Society for the Care of the Sick. And they established funds for Terra Santa and for the cativos, the prisoners. And they started Dotar. And Dotar is a charity that was inspired by Venice. Joseph Pardo came from Venice to Amsterdam, and he took with him the idea of Dotar. And Dotar is a society that collected money, and the money was put in the bank, and from the interest, dowries were paid to prospective brides, some poor, some orphaned, some half-orphaned, and some rich also. It still exists today, and each year on Purim, prayers are still being said for Pardo and the other 19 founders of that society. And by doing this, by establishing this society, Joseph Pardo unwittingly saved his own family history. This is from a register of Irmãos or members of Dota. And this is the succession line of Pardos, who is occupied seat number 1 in this charity. The first one was Joseph Pardo. For him, David Pardo, who happened to be a son. And you see that David Pardo is succeeded by another David Pardo, and for him, his son, Joseph Pardo. There's a generation missing here because this is a later list, and there should have been a Joseph between David and David. But it runs all the way to well in the 19th century when the last Pardo became a member, and after him he had no succession in Dota. This may have been because he lived in Suriname, and his sons had no willingness to join Dota, or maybe they forgot. This is that line, and I added Joseph Pardo, the third item on this list. It started in 1615, and this is not a straight line. It is a straight line until Joseph Pardo, the third of that name, and he was succeeded by David Chaim Pardo, who was the son of Abraham Pardo, and Abraham Pardo was a brother of this Joseph Pardo. For Joseph Pardo had no sons of himself, and then it's a straight line again. Well, like all human beings, Joseph Pardo died, and the community Bet Israel donated a stone for him. He had the stone carved and put on his grave. And that is this one. Next in line, son of Joseph. He was born in Salonika, so he must have been born before 1589. He was, to begin with, Chazan of Bet Israel in 1619. I still have to find out when he became the Chacham of Bet Israel, but that happened between 1619 and 1639. And in 1639, he became one of the Fab Four, one of the 4 Chachams of the community. The community consisted of, before Talmud Torah, of 3 communities: Bet Israel, Bet Jacob, and Neve Shalom. And they all had rabbis. And in 1639, the new community decided to keep all of them. But as they died out, they were not replaced until Isaac Aboab da Fonseca. Until he died, there were no replacements. And I call them the Fab Four because they are very famous. There's a lot published about Saul Levi Mortera. His sermons have been commented on in a book by Mark Saperstein. Very interesting. David Pardo is the one I'm talking about. Manasseh ben Israel has his own biography, and Isaac Aboab also has his own biography. He was absent from the community from 1644 until 1654 because he was a Chacham in Recife in the meantime. And there has been a lot published about these persons, except for David Pardo, who is seems to have been the quiet one. He did publish, but not much. In May of this year, I went to a symposium on the early modern rabbis in Amsterdam, both Sephardic and Ashkenazic. And Saul Levi Mutera, Manasseh ben Israel, Isaac Aboab were the talk of the day, and David Pardo hardly got a mention. That makes him not less interesting. Apart from Chacham, he was also the Chazan, the Hebra of the Biker Holem, which cared for the sick. In 1620, I see his name for the first time in the minute book of Bet Israel. Before that time, he was a Ruby there, and he kept the function of Ruby, but attached to that was the function of Chazan. And he is the first one in the family to become a Chazan in Amsterdam, but he was not the only one. At the bottom right, you see his signature. It's not as beautiful as those of the rest, but we have his signature here. He entered Dotar in 1623. So he followed his father in his footsteps, and he got membership number 1. I enlarged this signature a bit. And this gravestone is to the right at the bottom. At the top is the same gravestone, but it belonged to his father. So father and son are united here. And I enlarged the picture of the gravestone of David here. Next one in line is Joseph Pardo II. I call him the second because that was the first one. He's the third generation, and he was the son of David. He studied at Etzchayim from 1637 to 1639, but he may have been there before, because the student lists of Etzchayim start in 1637. In 1654, I find him as Chazan in Rotterdam, presumably for the small Portuguese Jewish community there. And he was in a relationship with Rebecca Hammerborg. And it's a bit strange. She is an Ashkenazic person. So how did that come about? In September 1654, Joseph Pardo, a reader at the Portuguese synagogue in Rotterdam, requested a formal declaration to address rumors concerning Rebecca Hymens. 2 witnesses, Samuel Jacobs and Simon Abrahams, Ashkenazi Jews, testified before a notary that they knew Rebecca well. They stated that Rebecca had worked for a married couple in Frankfurt 2 to 2.5 years prior. So that must have been early 1652. During her employment, she became pregnant by the head of the household. To avoid the scandal, Rebecca was sent away from Frankfurt, and she gave birth to the child in Wesel. The witnesses, which included Jean Regais and Abraham Aboab, signed the declaration. Later that year, on December the 7th, another notarial declaration was made at the request of Rebecca Heijmans herself. On December 1, 3 women, Gritgen Willems, a midwife, Aadgen Jans and Feitgen Jans, were called to the home of Salomon Hendricks on Glashaven in Rotterdam. They found Rebecca in labor and witnessed the birth of twin boys. During the delivery, Rebecca declared that Joseph Pardo, the same man who had requested the earlier declaration, was the father of the two children. So Rebecca had a daughter in early 1652 conceived by her employer in Frankfurt. Joseph Pardo then, after that, had twins with her in Rotterdam, one of whom must have been David Pardo, whose birthday then must have been 1st December of 1654. I think Joseph and Rebecca did not marry in public. The Sephardic community frowned upon marriages between Sephardim and Ashkenazim. Marrying before civil authorities meant that your marriage was announced 3 consecutive weeks at City Hall, very much in public. This could have led to the exclusion of Joseph Pardo from the Sephardic community. There may have been a ketubah, though. So he had twin sons, David and someone unknown, who may have died early, for we hear no more about him. And then Joseph Pardo followed in the footsteps of his father David, who was Chazan of the Hebra, or Chazan of Biker Olam, which is the same thing. And he became that upon the death of his father in 1657. There's clearly a number missing here. In 1670, he became Chazan of Gemelut Hasidim, one of the larger charities of Amsterdam. As a Chazan da Hebra, he was obliged to look after the sick and to accompany the dead and the family of the dead to Bet Chaim, to say prayers at their grave and to support the family. For that end, he received from time to time a cash sum of money from the Mahamat to dole out according to his own insights. He also entered Dota. Oh no, this is Joseph III. This is out of place. No, this is him. This is him. He followed also in the footsteps of his father David. Joseph Pardo is mentioned in the first sentence. In the third line, you see that he's the son of Chacham Rabbi David Pardo. And again, you see his signature under his entry into Dota. He also wrote Shohan Aruch, which is a companion of Jewish halakhic rules, originally written by Joseph Caro in Terra Santa, the Holy Land, which became the standard for halakhic rules for the general public. And what Joseph Pardo did, he wrote an abbreviation of that for the layman. But it was only published by his son, David Pardo, the one who was born in 1654, who succeeded him in Dota. This is his daughter, Rachel Pardo. It is mentioned in this entry in the archives of Dota that she won in the lottery that Dota was. Brides to be could win a dowry, but they had to enter a lottery with dozens and sometimes hundreds of other young girls, brides to be, who want to have a go at winning a lottery, at winning a dowry. And you see her name in the last line, Rachel, daughter of Joseph Pardo. This was in 1666. In 1668, when she got married, and only after she got married, she actually received the dowry of 1,000 guilders, which was a substantial sum at the time. And she married an Ishak de Emmanuel Barro. Her marriage ban was done in the same year, 1668, and it mentions that she was 16 years old. And well, that puts her birth in the year 1652, but we saw just now that she was the daughter not of Joseph Pardo, but of someone in Frankfurt, Rebecca Hammerborg. So what happened here is that Joseph presented his stepdaughter to Dota as his legitimate daughter. I think I can forgive him. 1,000 guilders was a lot of money in that time. But cheating then was possible to Dota. Oh, am I too fast? So what happened to Rebecca Hammerborg? We don't know. But we know that the wife of Joseph Pardo was still alive after his death. In 5438, the widow of Joseph Pardo was admitted to Sedaka. She was to receive 6 guilders a month. But she did not stay long on the list of the Sedaka, for in 1670, no, in 1680, 2 years later, she received 250 guilders from the community to move to Curacao. I enlarged the line that deals with it. Avieva, VA, Avieva de Joseph Pardo, Gavai, o Curacao. Now, 250 guilders is a lot of money, but it spared the Mahamat from paying for 6 guilders per month for the rest of her life. For now, she belonged to the community of Curacao. Why did you go to Curacao? I think that was because in the meantime, the brother of Joseph, Joshua, had become a hacham on Curacao. So she had family there. Her own son, David Pardo, at least, I think that this must concern Rebecca Hammerborg, but I can't prove it. So I think this was also the mother of David Pardo. And David Pardo did not go to Curacao. He was already married, but we come back to that. And here we see the gravestone of this Joseph Pardo. So now we have 3 generations here. They all lie next to each other. This is the grave of Joseph Pardo, the first. This is his son David Pardo, who shares the same tombstone. And this is the gravestone of Joseph Pardo. Okay. So now we go to the Yoshiao Pardo, son of David. He was also named as Yehoshua Pardo, but he signed himself as Yoshiao Pardo. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know how to cut this out. So you have to live with this, I'm afraid. Yoshiao Pardo, son of David, brother of Joseph, married the daughter of his teacher, Sol Levi Mortera, who was one of the Fab Four. He also studied at Etzchaim, but a little bit longer than his brother, until 1643. He became a teacher in Rotterdam, 1650. He became a teacher at various yeshivas in Amsterdam. After the school where he taught in Rotterdam moved to Amsterdam. He was a hacham on Curacao in 1674 and a hacham on Jamaica 1683, where he died in 1684. He also was a chazan of Gemelut Hasidim in 1670. So how is that possible? Were they both chazan of Gemelut Hasidim? Yes, they both were, but not simultaneously. Gemelut Hasidim was established in 1670. They decided to appoint two chazans. One of them was Yoshiao Pardo, and I don't know who the other one was. But after a few months, they decided that they didn't need any chazan. And then a few months later, they appointed Joseph Pardo, the brother of Yoshiao, as chazan of Gemelut Hasidim. So I don't know exactly what happened there. That's something to find out. I got stuck here. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment so I can take a glass of water and restart my screen, my sharing. And miraculously, all my notes have gone. Now my cursor isn't working anymore.
I should tell people that Tom's actually working on his wife's laptop today, so that's why it's problems.
Okay, doing a great job.
I'll try once more. Now it works again. Okay. So the last post that Rabbi Yoshiao had was on Jamaica. This is his gravestone, kept with his skull and bones. A text in Hebrew, a text in Portuguese, another text in Hebrew, and beneath that another text in Portuguese. He was Chacham, H. Moreno, Chacham Moreno, and Moreno is teacher. And Arab, another title. And here it says Dar, but it is badly readable. And I think I see here a P and not a D. But P, the tail of the P disappears in the crack. So I think what is meant is Pardo. I see here a D, P-A-R-D, and there must have been an O here. So I think that there can be no doubt that this is our Rabbi Yoshiao Pardo. And if you look at this article in the Smithsonian, you see that they used that same gravestone, only they cut it off at the head. And the skull and bones here are used to argue in this article that the skull and bones designate pirates who were buried on Jamaica. Now, skull and bones were not a pirate symbol. They were a symbol about the brevity of life, a memento mori, and it signified that everyone will become skull and bones at one point in his future. The article itself, curiously, does not mention who is buried here, maybe for fear that someone would remark, hey, Gagam, an aged one at that, as a pirate, how is that possible? So I can assure you that nothing of this is true. He was too old to be a pirate, and skull and bones don't mean that you were a pirate. There were 7 graves on Jamaica with skull and bones. One of them was from this rabbi, and another was from a woman. And the other 5 were from, I'm sure, honorable businessmen. A recap. The first 3 generations. There's Joseph Pardo, besides David Pardo, whom we discussed, and he had 2 other children. I'm not sure that they were his children, but they are mentioned in literature. And if Gagam Abraham Pardo is his son, then this Abraham Pardo received support from Amsterdam from 1640 to 1639, as you say, to 1650 in Jerusalem. And then he died, I think. From that point on, his widow was named. And last, we have Isaac Pardo, who died in Uskop, Turkey. I don't know, maybe that's Skopje, and then it's not Turkey. Well, technically it's the Ottoman Empire, but it's not Turkey. David Pardo had sons, Joseph Pardo and Joshua Pardo, and also a daughter, Sarah Pardo, born in 1634 in Amsterdam, and she married Gagam Joseph Salem in 1651. And both went to Jerusalem. And Sarah died there after Joseph Salem died. For I see her in the list as Sarah Pardo, widow of Salem. The next David Pardo, the son of Rebecca Hammelborg, so I think, and Joseph Pardo. He studied at Eschaim. I saw his name a few times in the 70s at Eschaim as a student. He married Esther Abenater, who was the daughter of a Chazan. And that Chazan was Emmanuel Abenater, and he was Chazan in Amsterdam. So he married into another Chazan family. All of these Chazans in Amsterdam, they form one big family with lots of marriages between them. David Pardo moved to London in on the distinguished website Nassau Hebraica. You can find his name a dozen times. And the first time he's mentioned is in 1678. He started out as a Ruby, a teacher. But in 1680 he was appointed to Kazan and then he combined the two occupations. He earned some 40 pounds per year and later 50 pounds, which is quite nice for that time. He disappeared from London, though, in 1700. And what happened? In 1700, Salonika experienced too much stress from his function as hahamim in London. There was considerable opposition to him, and he took his leave and went to Amsterdam to become hahamim there. Also disappeared from London was David, but he went the quiet way. He just disappeared. He's no longer on the list of salaried people, and someone else was named in his place without even the name of David Pardo mentioned, but it was also in that year. He went back to Amsterdam very briefly and then moved to Surinam in 1701 and became Gazan there. He came back to Amsterdam, I don't know precisely which year, maybe because of medical troubles, because he already had an advanced age. And surprisingly enough, he did not join one of his sons there, but he lived in a rented room in the house of someone else. When he died in 1733, an inventory of his books was made up on the request of his sons Isaac and Joseph, who lived in Amsterdam. And surprisingly, the brothers Isaac and Joseph repudiated the inheritance. And it was quite an interesting inheritance, for there were 50 gold guinea pieces to begin with. There were books, and there were printed books in bulk, and there was a portrait of David Pardo himself. So I now ask everyone to look at the attic to find out where the portrait has may have been, maybe somewhere. And it could be in Amsterdam somewhere, or maybe on Curacao. David Pardo also became a member of DOTA, but he does not sign. And that may have been because maybe he already was in London at the time. He also got that #1 sign here. He printed the book written by his father, Johan Aro. There are several versions of that book, and one of them has an extra, a Haggadah. This Haggadah moved from Amsterdam to London with its owner, David Pardo. And it's the first Haggadah that ever entered Latin America or the Caribbean world. And some historians have written about the fact, and they use this as an illustration of the Pesach problem. And the Pesach problem is, how can Jews celebrate Pesach while they themselves also had slaves? The issue has not been resolved yet. Esther Abenater, wife of David, had a nice gravestone in Suriname. So she stayed in Suriname after her husband had left for Amsterdam. We don't know why the separation, if it was medical reasons or if there were personal problems. I don't think so, because if you look at the epitaph, it says the grave of the fortunate, honorable, and virtuous Esther who was the wife of the perfect Chacham Rabbi David Pardo, of blessed memory. You don't put it on your grave if you are in quarrel. She reached the age of 85 years and she was buried in 1741. She also made a last will and she mentions all her children, except one son, Josiah, who she purposely deleted from her last will. We don't know the exact reason, but it could be that Josiah Pardo had two children, not with a wife or his wife, but with a slave woman. And it could be that there are descendants from them also today. David Pardo was an excellent writer. He produced one of the most beautifully written Sefer Torahs ever. It's still in the possession of Bevis Marks, and Shalom Morris gave one of his talks about them. The next one we go to is the son of Joshua Pardo, the brother of Joseph. I have to rely on literature here because I don't have the sources in New York at my fingertips. It said that he was a merchant in Newport from 1685. Later in London, that's not correct, that should be New York. First Khazan of New York, mentioned in 1692. He is mentioned in New York tax lists from 1695 to 1697. In a nice house, reflecting his status as a wealthy merchant. But he died on Curacao. And his gravestone doesn't say that he is a Khazan, but from the text, which says that he sang beautiful melodies, you might think that he was a Khazan. He died in 1702. And his alias would have been Saul Brown. Again, I don't have the sources, I have to rely on literature. Isaac S. Emanuel wrote about him, about Saul. He writes mainly about David H. Pardo, but he gives a reference to a publication, PAJHS, Publications of the American Jewish Historical Society, volume 23. There's a page number, so I looked it up, and it's part of a list of published wills of Jews in New York. And this is an abstract. Joseph Brown makes his last will, leaves money to Joseph Bueno and the widow Esther Brown. And they have to handle his affairs after he is dead. And he leaves money to his brother David Brown, to his cousin Josias Brown, son of the widow Esther Brown, so she must have been a son of this widow. And, to his niece Rachel Sarfatin. And he makes Joseph Bueno and Esther Brown his executors. It does not mention Saul Brown. Well, it mentions Esther Brown, who could have been a Pardo, but it does not mention the name Pardo also anywhere. So I don't know what to make of this. Another publication was done by Leo Hershkovitz. He also mentioned Saul Pardo. Saul Pardo, the first known Khazan in New York, the tax list, etc. had 6 children, 4 of whom were alive in 1708. And 2, Joseph and Sarah, had died previously. After her husband's death, Esther continued his business, as is evident from the contents of her inventory. And the inventory is also in this article by Leo Hershkovitz. And again, the widow Esther Brown, taken at the request of her executrix and daughter Abigail Brown, but it also doesn't mention Pardo. And I would have liked to see the name Pardo in any of these abstracts of original documents. So what I did was ignore this. This identification of Saul Pardo with Saul Brown may have been true, but as long as evidence does not surface, I prefer to keep it simple. The children of Jojo Pardo that I could find were Rachel Pardo, married to an Elie van Dalen in Curacao, and Saul Pardo, died in Suriname. Could also be that Saul Pardo never was in New York, if all the evidence mentions Saul Brown. And I have to research that yet, maybe for another presentation. Joseph Pardo and Rebecca Heijmans. Well, Rachel Pardo is mentioned here as his daughter, but as we saw, she isn't. And she married Isaac Emmanuel Baruch. There was a daughter or son of theirs who died 6 December 1654. And given that this is 6 days after the birth of David Pardo, I presume that this is the twin brother of David, who died in childbirth then. And the other son is David Pardo, Esther, who married Esther de Emmanuel Abenatar. The next generation, the 5th, all the Pardos of Suriname, Amsterdam, Jamaica, New York in the 18th century descend from 2 brothers, Joseph and Yoshiyahu or Jehoshua. All the 19th century Pardos descend from Abraham Pardo in Suriname and from his second cousins Joshua and Isaac, and their relationship is as follows. To the left, Abraham Pardo, son of David, son of Joseph, son of David. And then there's Isaac Pardo, and of course his brother Joshua, son of Saul Pardo, son of Joshua Pardo, son of David. So here, these are the same. David Pardo, Rachel Sanchez, David Pardo, Rachel Sanchez. This is the relationship, and everything that came after that descends either from Abraham or from Isaac and his brother Joshua. Let's go back to the children of David Pardo and Esther Abenatar. There's a Manuel Abenatar, who must have been named after his grandfather Emmanuel Abenatar. He died in Suriname, 1718. His gravestone can be found in the book Remnant Stones from Aviva Ben Ur. His brother Joseph, named after the paternal grandfather, died in Amsterdam 1755. He was single, did not have children. But in his last will from 1754, he mentioned Sarah Sam Calden a lot. I believe some 15 times. And she was his servant. Given that Joseph Pardo tried everything to make sure that Sarah Sam Calden got what she was supposed to get. He mentioned her 15 times, and this also makes me think that there may have been a relationship between this Joseph and this Sarah Soundkalden. Of course, I can't prove anything. There was an Isaac who died in Amsterdam, 1747. These two brothers went first to Suriname, but came back to Holland, circa 1730. Well, maybe with their father, I don't know. And they established a company named Isaac and Joseph Pardo, and they traded in coffee, cacao, and tobacco. Colonial years. There was a daughter, Rachel, who married Joseph Gomez in 1743 in Suriname. Josias died in Suriname 1760. He was the one with two children by a slave. Abraham died in Suriname 1778. Saul died in Suriname. Couldn't find his grave, but one of the many last wills of Joseph and Isaac Pardo, in this case a will by Joseph Pardo, mentions Saul as having died, and that this was the reason to renew his last will, to give everything that was supposed to go to Saul to the rest of his brothers and sisters. And there was Ribka, who died young. And there may have been other children of David Pardo who died young. A large family, two traded in Amsterdam, and these three, Josias, Abraham, and Saul, established two plantations in Suriname. One of them was called Carthago, and they produced the cacao, the coffee, and the tobacco, sent it to Holland, and that was sold it there. Abraham Pardo. This is a gravestone taken from remnant stones. Sorry, this is the wrong one. The stone of Abraham is also spectacular, I can assure. It mentions that he was a lover of science. It also mentions that he was born in London, with the exact date. And going back to the annual accounts of London, I was able to find the birth of a son of Joseph Pardo on nearly the same date. So that ties this Abraham to his father David. This let's go back to Abraham for a bit. Oh, sorry. Of all the sons of David Pardo, he was the only one to marry. He first married. I couldn't find a marriage, but there were children of that couple buried in Suriname. And then he remarried in Amsterdam with a Hannah Pacheco. And the purpose of that marriage was children. For Abraham was 60 years old at the time of his marriage. And thus saved the line of David Pardo from dying out. Now we go to the other line. This is Isaac Pardo, son of Joshua, son of Saul, son of Joshua, son of Joseph. He lived first on Curacao. He married there in 1750 with someone called Leah Vaz Faro. They had a couple of children. At a later age, Isaac Pardo got widowed and he became blind. And he went to Amsterdam, possibly to get better better medical care there. And his image shows that in Amsterdam he had a slave, a Negro named Anthony. And he declares that he wants to set this Isaac free after his death. Set free of all his slavery, of all his services as a slave. Below that is the signature of Isaac Pardo. This is the eye, and this says Pardo. He must have been very sick. The story about Anthony goes like this. In 1783, Anthony, his wife Magdalena, and their son Emmanuel were brought from Curacao to Amsterdam, where they lived in a house on Nieuwe Heringracht, now number 105. Anthony served as the personal servant of the elderly Portuguese Jewish merchant Isaac Pardo, while Magdalena also worked as a servant. The status of enslaved Jews, enslaved people in Amsterdam was ambiguous, as slavery was not officially permitted. A legal provision from 1644 declared all persons within the city free, but enslaved individuals had to actively claim their freedom. Although some enslaved people from the colonies sought freedom by escaping to Amsterdam, their legal status often remained unresolved. Isaac Pardo, who was blind and old, made provisions in his will to free Anthony after his death. He instructed his children to care for Anthony, Magdalena, and Emmanuel, providing them with food, clothing, and lodging in exchange for their continued service. If either party no longer wished to continue the arrangement, Anthony would receive 400 guilders annually. Although the payment was not transferable to Magdalena, she and Emmanuel would be granted freedom and could return to Curacao at the Pardo's family expense. After Pardo's death in 1785, it is unclear what became of Anthony, Magdalena, and Emmanuel. But future archival finds may shed light on these lives. And my conclusions. The first 5 generations would produce a relatively small family tree, but it covered 4 continents and many countries. In the 17th century, there were 2 branches. In the 18th century, there were 3. After that, it branched out. In the 17th century, the family was religiously occupied. In the 18th century, they worked mostly as merchants. In both branches, there were connections to slavery, to plantations, to household slaves. One branch moved to Venezuela, where there are still descendants. And there may have been descendants in other countries as well as on Curacao, but my research stops here. Thank you all.
Thank you very much. That was fascinating. Just to start, by way of trivia, somebody was telling me the other day that the maternal grandparents of the new Mexican president are Pardos from Bulgaria. I'm not sure if that's true, but if it is, it would be interesting to see whether the Mexican Pardos are related to the Amsterdam Pardos.
Could also be via this Jacob Pardo
Yeah.
that lives in Skopje, Turkey.
Yes, as you were talking, I looked up the town. I'm sure I will
I
massacre
don't
it.
know.
I think it's called-
Adam Brown is here. Maybe he can tell something, or isn't
Yeah.
he?
I think he
Maybe
is.
he can tell something about it from a Y-DNA perspective.
That was exactly my thought. The town in Turkey, forgive my pronunciation, I think it's Üsküp, which is in the European part of Turkey. It's not that close to Edirne, but I don't know. Maybe there was some reason to be there. It doesn't seem.
It's Skopje in Macedonia.
Oh, okay. Okay, then there's two places with the same name. Okay, that makes much more sense. Thank you.
It's still called Üsküp in Turkish.
Oh,
Skopje.
okay. So I got lied to by Google Maps. Thank you.
So we have 3 separate Pardo families that we've tested, one of which is Mexico, which doesn't show any Jewish connections.
Okay.
But the other 2, both are in, one is in Istanbul today, and the other was in Sofia, Bulgaria. Both Jewish, both connected to Iberia in some way. One of them had connections in Tunisia, but they may have been from Livorno. It was a Livornese family. And the other, let's see here, the other was a known, and that family, that Livorno family, also had connections to a Mexican family with no known Jewish ancestry, but clearly from the same lineage, a Moroccan family, and also the De Lara family that we know about, from the Netherlands. So that's an interesting group. That's the Pardo Rokas family from Pisa, who we find today in Istanbul. The other one was another Pardo family that we found in Rhodes and in Morocco and in Croatia. So both Pardo families have a real connection to North Africa and to the Ottoman Empire. And one has a connection to a Mexican family, the other has a connection to a Dominican family. So both of them show this beautiful spread, from Iberia to Eastern Mediterranean into the New World. So they both have an identical spread, but they're not the same family paternally. Now, and that's all we know right now. It'd be very interesting to test one of the ones from the Caribbean / Amsterdam to see which of these 2 lineages they come from. And if you got me somebody, it would be very easy for us to do.
Well, we have some Pardo descendants here.
Well, all they have to, if you give them my contact information, I'd be happy. I can type it in. I'd be happy to communicate with them, and we would test them at our expense, just so we can settle this matter.
That would be great. I'm one here. My 10th grade grandfather was Josiah Pardo, as far as we know.
Okay, so my name is Adam Brown, and if you are you in contact with David or Ton?
With Ton. Yes.
Okay, so Ton will give you my email address, and we'll get you something right away. Where do you live?
I live in Boston. My mom's on the call too. She's in North Carolina, so she's one generation closer.
I'd be delighted. So you get my email address is adam.brown, adam.brown.
At Gmail or?
At Avotaynu, Avotaynu. And I'll put it into the chat right now.
Oh, great. Thank you.
And anyone here who wants to be tested is welcome to contact me, and we'll see if you qualify for it.
Great.
But,
I'm Ron Pardo. My father was born in Sofia, Bulgaria, and then immigrated to Palestine and Israel, obviously.
Are you a friend of Randy's?
Yes.
Okay, so I may have tested you, Ron. So you may be one of the 2 I'm talking about. Is that possible?
Okay. Possible.
Because
Yes.
I know Randy sent me one of the participants, and
Yeah.
And you may be the guy. So we'll take a look. But I'm going to post my email address, and I will be in contact with you. Okay? Because I think I did. Let's just take a look here for a second.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, my grandfather, who died when I was very young, also had Turkish citizenship, and that's how they got out of Bulgaria.
No, you don't appear to be the one who Randy had us test. But let's. Why don't you?
I know somebody. Yeah.
Go ahead.
I know. Do you work with WAS as well?
Michael.
Michael. Yeah. Okay. So maybe Michael is the person that I spoke to. That.
Okay. Let's do it. Okay. Just.
Okay.
I'm going to send you my email address, and I'll ask Michael for your address, and both Pardo families would be happy to test, and we'll see if we're talking about who we're talking about here.
Very good.
Okay. Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. So now we've got hold of bodily fluids. Ali was asking an interesting question. He says, "Is it possible that Anthony was Isaac's son from an enslaved woman? Because he did seem to give rather a lot of money. It seems a bit unusual." No? Tom?
Oh, sorry, I missed the question. I was looking at the chat.
So Ali was asking whether it's possible that Anthony the slave was Isaac's son by an enslaved woman, because it seems quite a lot of money that was being given.
I don't know. Could be. It doesn't say so.
Okay.
But if we can descendants from him, we'll send them to Edinburgh.
There was also a question about whether any of the Pardos were Shabbatian.
Michael Watts.
Maybe.
Michael Watts, person to talk to.
Just maybe David Pardo, Gazana, London, and Suriname. After all, he left London at the same time as his boss, Samuel Arion. No,
Yeah.
Selomo Arion. And he was suspected of Sabbatean sympathies. So he may have left in sympathy with his boss, and maybe he also had those beliefs, but I don't know for sure.
Thank you. Diane is asking if there are any known links to Pardos in Cuba.
I suppose it could be. I suppose in the 19th century you see a lot of migration from Curacao to Venezuela and other countries in Latin America, but also to Panama, Costa Rica, to other islands in the Caribbean. It sort of spread out, and I think it's very well possible that Pardos on Cuba are descendants of these Pardos, but you have to find the documents, or you have to find the right DNA.
Yes. Another question I've got is that a couple of the early Pardos were described as being chazans for charities. Now I understand the chazan as somebody who leads the singing in a synagogue service. I'm wondering why a charity might have a chazan. Is it a different usage?
Charities were also sort of brotherhoods. So one part of the work was giving aid to the poor, and the other part of what they did was hold meetings, discuss Talmud Torah, discuss other religious texts, or things like that. And for that, they may have made use of chazans. These charities secretly also existed because the Portuguese Jews had a very authoritarian Mahamat. They called all the shots. And these charities, they could express their own individuality, not under the umbrella from the Mahamat. And they held also, maybe they also held services.
Yeah.
No.
Okay, thank you. Mariella, you have your hand up.
Hello, how are you? Let me
Fine.
just yes, I think. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, Ton. How are you?
I'm fine.
I want to point out something that Ton said before. When I made my research about my Pardos families, I am descendant from Joseph and David. I found that in the 90s, a lot of Pardo came mostly to Colombia, Panama, and Costa Rica, were not Jewish. They descended from some Galician military, is Jose Pardo de Sela, and that is, and he was Christian in 1492, and most Pardo which came to this Venezuela, no Venezuela, Colombia, Panama, Costa Rica, and Cuba were descendants of that Pardo. In Latin America, in Latin America, you will find two Pardos lines, one Jewish and one not Jewish.
Thank you.
That I found that when I made my research, I don't know, Ton, maybe 5-6 years ago. That is, it's very important because sometimes when you say you are Pardo, yes, o sea, you are Jewish. No, not all the who has the name Pardo were Jewish, or my family, or some my great grandfather were Jewish, but I'm not. But in that time, not all the Pardos came to Latin America were Jewish.
Thank you. That's what David and I always say. A surname has no indication of your religious beliefs.
We have a comment from Luca. Can I mention a connection with Italy in the 16th century before they appeared in Venice? I mean, Luca, if you want to.
Yes, I don't know how to raise my hand. I cannot find the icon. But no, the Pardo family is one family I looked into because there were some Pardo from my hometown, Ancona, actually. And you find, in fact, Pardos in Italy in the 16th century, in Ancona, in Ferrara, in Rome even. But then they disappear totally from these three places. The only place where you find them in the 16th century, and what you said, Tom, is Venice, where they continue then later on to stay. And then I think the Pardo Roques family was also mentioned from Pisa, and then from Livorno, and then from Livorno, a branch goes to Genoa, another branch goes to other places in Veneto, where they change the surname in Pardi and so on. But what I wanted to say is that, in fact, you find them in the 16th century in Ancona and in Ferrara. And these were two different families, because the family in the persons in Ancona are referred to as Ebrei Levantini, which means which came from the east, Greece, Turkey, and so on. While the family in Ferrara, they are referred to as Ebrei Portoghesi, Portuguese Jews. The family, in fact, in Ancona basically reopened itself to Jewish immigration from the east, I mean, those expelled from 1492 from Spain who went to the east, and from Portuguese only in 1532. And you have this time span between 1532 and 1555, so it's only 23 years, where disaster strikes in Ancona, where you have all these Portuguese Jews burned at the stake, and that's basically the end of the Portuguese community in Ancona. In Ferrara, you find many of them in the 16th century, but by 1630, because we have the census of 1630, you find virtually almost anyone coming from either from the Levant or from Portuguese Jews. So it means that a lot of immigration must have taken place also from Ferrara. From Ancona, we know the year in which everything changes, 1555, which is not so far from the 1559 you mentioned in Salonika. And in Ferrara, it's basically they leave progressively in the second half, especially after 1559, I would say. In the second from 59 until the end of the of the 16th century. Now, the interesting thing here is that you find this Moshe Pardo in Ancona, and in 1554, while in 1555, because of the disaster which took place, he moves to Ferrara, and then so this was the one referred to as Ebreo Levantino, so from the east, and you had a totally separate family, the family made by Caterina Pardo and his 3 children, Leah, Jacob, and Joseph, who you find from 1544 to 1555 in Ferrara. And here, there is no husband because the husband converted to Christianity. His name was Jacob Pardo. He converted to Christianity, but Caterina Fernandez, widower, the said widower of Jacob Pardo, who had changed his name into Gabriel Lopez after conversion, he continues to be part of a Portuguese Jewish community in Ferrara together with his her three children. So that's what I wanted. Yes. So because for a long time I wonder, but these Pardo were there from Spain originally, because what the name Evrei Levantini would imply, or from Portugal. And then it seems that, in fact, Pardo, which means, by the way, it means brown, as I'm sure most of you know, brown in English, Pardo, both in Spanish and Portuguese. You find many of them from the 13th century, 14th century, 15th century. You had many different Pardo families, both in Spain, all over the place, and in Portugal, also in many different parts. So it's very difficult to pinpoint from which part of Spain or what this particular family or families came from. But it is without doubt that some of them were Spanish and some of them were Portuguese, and this would explain also why we find in Italy at the same time some of them called Levantine Jews and others called Portuguese Jews. And for the Italians, for the political authority in the 16th century, it was very important if someone was Portuguese or Levantine, because it had implication concerning, of course, their possible baptism or not. So this is all I wanted to mention. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you. Bernard, would you like to unmute?
All right, thank you for a fascinating talk. I have a couple of questions. One, I was taking a phone call and missed who you were talking about when you referred to looking for a book with a portrait in, and what the book was. Who are you looking for? And I ask because I have Barry Layden coming to give a talk to the JGSGB at the beginning of next year, and he's got an extensive book collection which has a lot of very early Dutch editions and in particular books of Sephardic interest. So it's worth asking him.
If I may answer that one first. I was referring to an inventory of the goods of David Pardo.
Which one?
Gazan in London, Suriname, who returned to Amsterdam. And in Amsterdam, the inventory mentioned gold coins, books, some clothes, and a portrait of David Pardo himself. So the portrait is not in the book. It was an actual portrait.
Okay, which he's unlikely to have. It's still worth asking, though. Thanks. The other question that I have is about language. And you've got all of these people coming initially from either Portugal to Amsterdam or from the Levantine Jews to Amsterdam. And you've got the synagogue records in Portuguese, later records which you showed, but I'm not sure if they were civil in Dutch. Presumably the Jews coming from what we would consider to be the East would have been Spanish speaking rather than Portuguese, although they were operating in Portuguese for synagogue purposes. What languages did they work in the rest of the time? Because you've got so many different nationalities. And then, of course, it moves on. You've got the same phenomenon in England. You've got the same happening in the Caribbean. Did they have a lingua franca, or did they just work in a mixture of languages?
Most of them knew Portuguese and Spanish, and they used Portuguese for everyday language and for services in the synagogue, and Spanish was used for holy texts like the Bible. The Ferrara Bible is in Spanish. And there were a lot of
and
the
presumably
early,
outside they were
early works
operating in
of,
Dutch.
there were those that learned Dutch, and there were those that never learned Dutch. We find a lot of documents in the Amsterdam archives, and especially in the notarial archives, where the notary says at the end that the deed is drawn up in Dutch and translated by himself or by an interpreter into Spanish or Portuguese, because the ones whom he addressed didn't speak Dutch, and that happened quite a lot of times.
Thank you.
They
And I
spoke
just have
those
a comment.
languages, and some of them also spoke French and English.
Thanks. And just a quick comment on the skull and crossbones. It looks as though the pirates started adopting it around the 1720s, and the Sephardic Jews had been using it earlier than that, but not much earlier, probably the late 1600s onwards. I don't know if anybody has evidence of its use before that. I think the pirates used it to frighten people. I don't think the Sephardic Jews were using it for that purpose.
I don't know. But on cemeteries in Hamburg and in Amsterdam and maybe in London, I don't know, you find lots of Jewish graves, Sephardic graves, with skull and bones, but also with hourglasses, or with a hand coming from a cloud cutting down a tree, especially
with
used
angels
for young people. And there were other symbols that signify death. And a lot of these were people who never left Amsterdam. If they were all pirates, no.
No, that's the point I was trying to make. That the pirates adopted it later.
Yeah, but the one privateer, Samuel Parash, is buried in a grave that has no skull and bones. Okay.
Thank
you.
Thank you, Bernard. Does anybody else have any questions? Else we can draw to a close. So as always, we've overextended. No, it doesn't look like. So, Tom, thank you very much for a very informative talk. Yeah, as always, it was very impressive, and thank you to everyone. Actually, especially for to Luca for your contribution. I thought that was absolutely fascinating. We will be back in 2 weeks. I'm not totally sure who the speaker is. I sort of cornered somebody in synagogue yesterday who's sort of done quite a lot of research. So possibly him. Actually, also at Bevis Marks synagogue, I'm seeing if we can get the benefactors books scanned. There are some from the very early congregation which are kept there and are read out on Colony Dre at the end of the service. Diane, I will try and share the recording with you tomorrow. I'm sorry you came a bit late. But to everybody else, especially Tom, thank you very much for a really informative talk, and we look forward to seeing everyone in 2 weeks' time.
And thank you to our patrons.
Thank you.